the idea that people are taking interest in it and getting to the point where they bring us things and they ask questions and they interact with the museum and they come and visit, because any given day someone will walk in the door without an appointment or anything, and they'll just start telling us a story about their history or a place they worked or where their parents were a glass factory worker or a coal miner or something, and they will tell you their entire history. And then you'll say, well, if you have some artifacts, we'll take those and put them in an exhibit. And we've done that for people.
Positively West Virginia is powered by Breezeline high-speed fiber internet and sponsored by Highmark West Virginia, Freedom Key of Morgantown, Interaction Media, and Storymaker. With the help of these sponsors, we are able to share the positive business stories of West Virginians, including the one featured in today's episode.
Well, folks, we're visiting today with Jason Burns. He's with the Morgantown History Museum. Jason, thanks for being on the podcast.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, it's great to have you here and great to meet you. Tell us, Jason, about the Morgantown History Museum.
Morgantown History Museum. It is basically Morgantown's closet. It's where we put everything. I like to think of it as we're lifesavers, not in the medical terminology, but in the afterlife terminology. We have the lives of a lot of historical figures, a lot of people, and then we just have the social history of Morgantown and Monongalia County, because that's our demographic of the entire history of the county in our museum. It's improving every day since I took over in November. So the museum is a place where you can come and learn about Lake Monongahela, which was 900,000 years ago, or you can see fossils, or you can see Native American artifacts, or you can hear about Zachary Morgan if you need more information about him or other people that lived during his time. We also got a good exhibit on Monongahela Rye, which was whiskey that was created here.
No kidding.
The Civil War, the entire history of Morgantown, companies, businesses that were here, sports figures, Black history. John Edwards, the fellow who created our first water service, is in Morgantown. And then we've also got, of course, the glass factories, Seneca Glass, and then we've got the shirt factory history. And my favorite, most recent acquisition that I was able to pick up was almost the entirety of Ruby and Catchy's restaurant from Cheat Lake.
No kidding.
We went out there 3 days. And the lady who was selling the place gave me not only the china and the menus and little things like that. She gave me a booth.
Really? How cool!
The sign on the front of the restaurant. So
oh my gosh,
we've got a lot of really cool things.
Yeah.
Because I think people don't think about current history as history, but literally yesterday was history. This morning was history.
That's true.
So it all depends
on
on
way to look at it. Yeah.
If it's historical, it's worth being studied, and when people go back and look at the social history of Morgantown in this time period that we're talking about right now, COVID is going to be a big thing in the future. So why not have, examples of things that happened here during COVID, even though we're still in the middle of it, kind of. I'm working on creating an archive of COVID memorabilia from the county. So it's something you don't really think about, but in 100 years, we'll all be gone.
Yeah.
And
somebody has to curate that, right?
The stories will still be there.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying, saving lives. You save the lives
Yeah.
of the people who are going through this.
That's so cool. I love your perspective on that. Where is the museum physically located?
We are located downtown at 175 Kirk Street. It is behind it's actually the annex of the former post office, which is the Mon Art Center, is in the top where they have the art gallery. We're in the back in the annex that was built in the 1930s. So we're kind of in the basement, kind of out of the way. But if you know where the Hotel Morgan is, you can see the MAC right next to it. We're just in the back.
Okay.
There.
Is it a large facility? I've not been there.
I
apologize for not being there because it sounds like a cool place and I definitely want to come. Talk about the physical
it's
attributes.
all on one floor.
Yeah.
So it's very walkable. We have ADA access and all of that. That's no problem. But the issue that we're really starting to have an issue with anyway is space. We're losing space. And so the more artifacts we get, the more things come in. we have to think of, what do we put in storage? What do we keep in the museum? What do we keep in the archive? Of course, climate control is a big issue because you've got things like textiles, which don't do very well in humidity or very dry temperatures. You have to keep that, climate controlled. So the facility itself, I walked it, and it's about 50 by 50 feet. That's not much space for an actual floor. The archive is a little larger than that. That's where we have all of the artifacts that we don't have on the floor. And then we also have a garage where we have intake and outtake. So that's where, things come in that we need to accession, or just parts for displays, parts for exhibits that, the bones of things that we put together come in there. So we have about 15,000 current artifacts in the museum.
That's a lot. That seems like a lot.
Trust me, it's a lot. I've like I said, I've been here since November. I have not seen all of them.
Wow.
I literally go back in the museum when I'm, feeling like I just need a break. I'll go back in the archive and I'll open a box and just look inside and see what's in there. And then, a lot of times I'll find something really cool and I'll take a picture of it and I'll post it on our social media. So if you ever see a photo of something I've put on social media, it's likely I saw it 3 minutes before you did.
Oh, really? It's new to you and it's new to us.
Yes,
at the same
exactly.
Time. That's cool. Jason, how you grew up in Riverton, West Virginia, Pendleton County.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about how your journey from that being born and raised in Pendleton County to being the manager of and the leader of the Morgantown History Museum. What's that journey look like?
It was pretty long. Even when I was a little kid, I loved putting together, dioramas and things. I was always winning the science fair, social studies fair. I was always doing that. I was very interested in my own family history because back home we have a lot of family stories, that we tell to each other. Everything from, things about grandma and grandpa to things about the cousins to things about ghosts and monsters and things like that. So there's a lot of family history that I'm really steeped in. And so that was the foundation. And then I went into journalism in college. And after that, the newspaper I worked for folded. So I came to grad school at WVU. And I got a degree in sociology, anthropology, and then I got another degree in educational leadership, 2 masters.
Great.
And worked at the university for 17 years. Ran Mountaineer Week, which was the big cultural celebration there. That was a lot of work.
I guarantee you. I've been to Mountaineer Week many years. And it's a wonderful event.
If you've seen the craft fair, the quilt show, that was me.
All right.
The food out front, that was me.
Wonderful.
There were other people helping, but behind the scenes, we were all kind of, working together. But when it came down to the decisions, I was the one. They were like, "What do we do about this?" So Sanja Wilson ran it for many years before me, and I learned a lot from her about event planning. And so when she retired, I took over, and the first year I did everything myself. And after that, I was like, I need help. So then I got help after that.
Wonderful.
But the event planning really helped with the museum, putting things together. Puzzles are my thing, and the museum is the biggest puzzle you'll ever see in your life. I mean, there's so many pieces there that you don't know what they look like, and you don't know what they're supposed to look like, but you have to put them together with something else to create the big picture. So
the story.
Exactly.
Yeah,
the story of the museum is, the story of the museum itself is quite fascinating, but it's just a part of a blip in the thousands of years of history that you can literally walk into in our museum.
Yeah, that's super cool. Jason, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. This is Positively West Virginia.
Your prescriptions are designed to keep you healthy, active, full of life. At Highmark Blue Cross Blue Shield, we're making vital medicine more affordable. Because when your prescriptions don't cost an arm and a leg, you can use those limbs for something more meaningful. Because life. Highmark Blue Cross Blue Shield, West Virginia.
At Freedom Kia, you'll find the perfect ride and savings for your summer adventures. This summer, dive into savings and fun. Just down the road is the Aquatic Center at Milan Park, where you can cool off and have some fun.
Find what you have been searching for in the 2024 Kia Telluride. Right now at Freedom Kia of Morgantown, qualified buyers can save $2,500 on the 2024 Kia Telluride. For your next new Kia, look no further than Freedom Kia exit I-79, exit 153, Morgantown.
All right, folks, we're back. We're visiting with Jason Burns from the Morgantown History Museum. Jason, this has been a great conversation so far. You know, what's the thing you're most excited about for the museum here in Morgantown?
Oh my gosh, the idea that people are taking interest in it and getting to the point where they bring us things and they ask questions and they interact with the museum and they come and visit, because any given day someone will walk in the door without an appointment or anything, and they'll just start telling us a story about, you know, their history or a place they worked or where their parents were a glass factory worker or a coal miner or something, and they will tell you their entire history. And then you'll say, well, you know, if you have some artifacts, we'll take those and put them in an exhibit. And we've done that for people. For one example, we have a man who was a shoemaker in Western Mon County, and his family donated artifacts years ago, and they, you know, they just kind of laid in the archive and storage, and I found them and I was like, we need to do something with this. So we created a whole shoemaking exhibit around this fellow who created shoes. He's, amazing, you know, back in the day out of actual leather, and sold them.
Wow. That's super cool. So is I get the sense that the museum then can have like it's like a never ongoing, changing, evolving. You got these exhibits that maybe will come up for a period of time. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, we have a room in the center of the museum that is our rotating exhibits.
Okay.
When I first started, we had an exhibit on the Mon River itself, just the uses of the Mon River. Then it went into Black history. So we had an entire exhibit on the Black history of Mon County, which is extensive. We also, now that has turned into the exhibit on the 100th anniversary of the Metropolitan Theater, which turned 100 years old this year, along with Don Knotts. And they both turned 100 years old within 3 days of each other.
Oh my goodness.
So we were celebrating both the theater and Don Knotts at the same time. It was, I'll just put it this way, it was a good kind of exhaustion.
Yeah, that's great.
It was a lot of fun.
You know, I'm grateful that you're doing that, because Morgantown has a storied history. We have a lot of things going for us. We have a lot of interesting people, right, that have come through Morgantown that are from here, that have gone on to do amazing things. And you know, like you mentioned, some of the industries like glass, that's been very important. And I think preserving that is extremely important and valuable. So thank you for what you're doing. What's the, you know, I don't know if you could even say this, but what's the most interesting thing that you've come across in the last year, you know, as part of the, you know, leading this whole initiative for the museum?
Oh my gosh. The most interesting thing, there's so many things.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things in the museum actually is when we have these books that the courthouse donated to us when they digitized everything. So we have these gigantic, they look like something out of Harry Potter. They're these gigantic ledgers of crimes and, you know, police blotters and things like that, court records. And one of them is literally from the 1860s through 1878. And it records the minutes of the City Council of Morgantown during the Civil War.
Wow.
So what you see in this book is perfect penmanship up until about 1861, when the firing on Fort Sumter happened, which they refer to in the book several times as the Great Excitement of 1861.
Wow.
The excitement of 1861 keeps being referred to. Then through that, you see the perfect penmanship, and then once war breaks out, there's mistakes. There's, you know, misspellings. Their letters are strewn all over. There's little notations in the side where they forgot something and they went back and wrote it in. So you can just tell the anxiety in the object.
Wow.
You can feel the anxiety of these people who have been gone for over 100 years, you know, some of them. And you can feel that. So that's what I like to say is a power of an object. Objects have power. And that's probably one of my favorite things in the museum.
That's
and
incredible.
when I found that, I was like, wow, that's amazing. Like, there's literally one page where it's Morgantown, Virginia, and then it switches to Morgantown, West Virginia.
No kidding.
That's
awesome.
Crazy.
I love that.
To
I mean,
read that.
I could just, as you're describing that, I'm putting myself in your shoes, like coming across that for the first time.
Yeah.
I bet that was powerful.
It was just
as a lover of history.
Just in a stack of books. And I picked it up and I was like, oh my gosh, what?
What have I found?
Is this what I think it is?
Yeah, it's so cool. And I bet, you said you had a background in journalism, working for a newspaper. I mean, your journalistic instincts probably are kicking in, saying, "I want to learn more about this," right? Yes, and that's so cool. And I think that's really neat that you're able to take that talent you have and the passion you have and be able to bring that to the West Virginia community. I think that's super, super cool. Now, speaking from the museum itself, how, who are the people that are coming to it? Are you drawing people from outside of Morgantown? Is it mainly Morgantown? Talk a little bit about that.
We get a broad spectrum of people. I would say the most of the people we get are older people. We do have school groups that come through.
Okay.
The school teachers brought through 2 or 3 large groups to the Black History exhibit when we had it
great.
up. They came through. They were part of a civil rights class, as I understand, something of that sort. But we have senior groups coming through from rest homes. We have groups like Howard Hanna coming through. They do retreats at the museum, and we have a printing press there that we can operate. It's an antique printing press, and we give demonstrations on how to use the printing press. Oh, wow. And so they are very interested in learning about the area. I'm guessing it helps with them knowledge of the area to help with the real estate.
It makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So we have many different demographics of people coming in. But most of the people are parents or people my age, around 45, 50, who come in to the museum, and they'll bring their families, they'll bring their parents, because I think that's the group that, like me, they're more I'm a very history buff person, and I'm to that point in my life where I want to learn about where I came from a little bit, and get interested in things. So I've got a little bit of time to sit back and reflect. So.
Yeah. When you think about Morgantown and the history, going back to those years, even before it was Morgantown, West Virginia, right? What are some things that you think people need to know about Morgantown? And maybe it's from a business perspective, or maybe an interesting character or two. What are the things that stand out to you?
Well, Morgantown started out as a fort area, a fort city, or a fort town, Morgantown. But before that, there was Fort Kern, and then there was Thomas Decker, of course, who's supposedly the first settler of the area, who built a home here on the end of Decker's Creek near the Mon. And then Thomas Decker's heir, I'm not sure how he was related, but Nicholas Decker was the guy who came back after Thomas Decker's settlement was destroyed by natives and rebuilt the settlement. So that settlement was the first one. But then we had Fort Kern, which is still around. I mean, you can go visit Fort Kern. It's in Greenmont. It still exists today. Then there was Fort Coben, which is now White Park is now on top of where Fort Coben
Creek.
Coben Creek. So there's a lot of Native American history here that isn't really, we don't know a lot about it. So there's a lot of things missing, but if you start digging into the history, you can find a lot of information that you wouldn't normally read about.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Great stuff. This is Positively West Virginia. We'll be right back.
My name's Caitlin Furby. I'm an interior designer with Remarkable Interiors. Our time is very limited. We're trying to do everything we can possible to keep our clients' projects moving and rolling. So StoryMaker has been really great for us for putting out how to explain our company. I can sit and agonize about a post. And is this right? Does this sound good? When I use StoryMaker, it sounds so beautiful, and it was so easy, and it saves me a lot of time to do the things that I'm really good at.
Stay connected with an unbeatable deal from Breezeline. Get reliable, fiber-powered 500 megabits internet for $39.99 per month with a $100 gift card and price lock guarantee, plus a free modem, free installation, and free Wi-Fi your way. Folks, here at Interaction Media, we're a media company, and we rely on high-speed internet every single day to get our jobs done. That's why we use Breezeline. It's affordable, it's fast, and they're awesome people as well. Learn more at breezeline.com. Folks, we're back. We're visiting with Jason Burns with the Morgantown History Museum. Jason, this is a fascinating conversation. Zach Will Morgan. Talk a little bit about him. Namesake.
Zach Will Morgan, the town's the town's founder. Well, he basically laid out this plan for Morgantown, the streets, and it was surveyed actually in around 1785, I believe. And so the town was named for him, but there were people living here before that around the area. I mean, for example, John Evans was here, Evansdale,
yeah.
You know,
wonderful.
That entire area was named after his family. And Zach Will Morgan was a son of Morgan, who was the state's first white settler, first European settler. And they came from Berkeley County to Morgantown. But along that way, Zach Will Morgan bought and sold property in Pennsylvania and other parts, you know, and he came and finally settled in West Virginia, in Monongalia County, what would become West Virginia. And his brother David lived down at Prickett's Fort. And so the family, you know, kind of, when Zach Will Morgan died, they buried him at Prickett's Fort with David's family. And so the city tried, in 1925, the city of Morgantown tried to get the people at Prickett's Fort to allow them to exhume Zach Will Morgan and bring his body to Morgantown and bury him here. But it was unsuccessful. So they left his body there. However, they did put a gigantic monument on Zach Will Morgan's grave, and they took his original tombstone, created a special case for it, and that tombstone is now in our history museum.
No kidding.
In Morgantown.
You can actually see that.
You can actually see the actual tombstone.
But Zach Morgan's body is still in Prickett's
Fort.
That's fascinating. Yeah. I did not know that.
Yeah.
Very, very cool.
Yeah, Zach Will Morgan's an interesting character. He was the first. One of his first professions, aside from land speculator, was tavern keeper. He literally started one of the first bars in Morgantown. So he would make Monongahela rye, which I mentioned earlier. They would make that because rye was easy to grow in the area. It grew very well in Mon County, but rye does not transport very well when you have to take it in long distances with unclimate controlled temperatures. So they would turn it into alcohol, stick it in barrels, and float it up and down the river and sell it to people. So they would take this stuff to Pittsburgh and they would bottle it and they would sell it all over the place. Monongahela rye was so popular, it was mentioned in Moby Dick.
No kidding.
Yes, Herman Melville was a big fan of Monongahela rye apparently, and he mentioned it in Moby Dick when he wrote it.
Wow. I did not know that either. This is really informative. So, has anybody revitalized that brand? That sounds
not
like
that I'm aware.
It sounds like a whiskey company ready to be started again.
It went on forever. There were several companies that paired with Monongahela rye. Several companies made their own versions of it, their own bottling versions of it, all from different. And I found three original bottles from Monongahela rye because I think it didn't end production until sometime around World War II. But you can find it every now and then. They still make reproductions of the labels and things. One of my goals for the museum is to actually take the one bottle we have, which is a really cool old gold and white label, and literally reproduce that into like a postcard or a poster or a T-shirt or something.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And
Super cool.
Found that bottle inside the wall of a house in South Park when it was being renovated.
No kidding.
Yes, and someone said, "Oh, these should be in the museum," so they gave it to the museum, and we've had it ever since.
That's a good point because you've talked about a couple of instances where it happens quite often where people bring in relics and artifacts from Morgantown's history. Is that something that's encouraged, and how do they How do they do that?
Yeah,
if you have something interesting.
Well, in my experience, it happens every possible way you can think of. People do call us and say, "Hey, I've got some things that my dad was a glass blower at the glass factory. Would you like this?" And we're like, "Yeah, sure." And they'll they'll bring it in and give it to us. Sometimes I'll be at an estate sale or an antique store. Like I was at Eloquence Antiques, which is up at the old mall, and I found a piece of Morgantown pottery just chilling in the display case there. And, I ended up buying it for the museum. That was my very first acquisition working there for the museum. Neat. It's a wonderful 4-gallon crock. Not nearly as expensive as some pieces of Morgantown pottery, which can go into tens of thousands of dollars. It's very rare. We have very long pottery history here in Mon County. I mean, Blacksville pottery, Monongalia pottery. The Thompson family were amazing potters at the beginning of the end of the 1700s. on into the 20th century, actually, almost. So most of that pottery that was still in existence ended up in the Smithsonian. There was a fellow from West Virginia who worked for the Smithsonian, and he took a lot of the pottery and artifacts, including the tools that they used to make the pottery, to the Smithsonian, and you can go there and see it today.
Yeah, you had mentioned glass factories and a couple of times, and
we had about 35 of those in operation at different times.
Yeah, what was the biggest one? Maybe at the time, was it Seneca?
Seneca was a very large one. We had then you had
Morgantown Glass.
Morgantown Glass, Morgantown Glass Guild. Morgantown Glassware Guild is the one that a lot of people think of when they think of John Kennedy and Jackie Kennedy.
Yeah, in the White House. Right?
They're the ones that created the glassware that went into the White House dining room. Yeah. And there's an interesting story about that, is that there's a fellow, you know what the Shack is, the Shack neighborhood house in
Persgrove or Osage?
Osage. It's a wonderful, community resource center for people. Well, there was a child who grew up in Osage, and he literally grew up in the Shack, taking classes at the Shack, doing things at the Shack, went on into the Air Force after he left school. After the Air Force, he got a job at the White House as Jackie Kennedy's event planner. And so here he was setting the table with Morgantown Glass in the dining room of the White House, being a kid who grew up in Osage.
That's crazy. What a story. Yeah,
and
that's awesome.
For the entire time up until he retired from the White House, he was also the White House Santa Claus.
No kidding.
Yes.
Oh, that's awesome. Jason, this has been an intriguing interview. I love the fact that you're, leading this organization, Morgantown History Museum. I love the fact that you're helping to preserve the history, not just ancient history, so to speak, but recent history too. Yeah. And I think that's super cool. I think it's educational. I think it's good for the economy. I think it's good for a quality of life that we have here in Morgantown. So thank you so much for that. How can our listeners learn more about Morgantown History Museum and even maybe get in contact with you? What's the best way for them to learn more about?
Well, we have a website. It's themorgantownhistorymuseum.com. If you try the old Morgantown History Museum website, you may pull up a gambling website. It was hacked and then taken away, but we got a new one. It's the MorgantownHistoryMuseum.com. You can also just walk in the door. We're open Wednesday through Sunday. We're open Wednesday through Friday, 11 to 5, and then Saturday and Sunday, noon to 6.
Amazing. Yeah.
We also take part in First Friday. So the first Friday of every month, we are open from 11 until 9 p.m. Sometimes we'll have artists there, we'll have musicians, we'll have storytellers, things like that. Since we are a small venue, we don't have a large band playing or anything like that, but at some points we've had speakers, we've had authors there telling about their books and signing books. So it's a really cool little event to have.
That's awesome.
Part of the museum.
Thank you, Jason. Our guest once again, Jason Burns with the Morgantown History Museum. It's an honor to have you here. Thanks for everything you're doing. Keep up the great work. Appreciate you.
We'd like to thank our partners, Highmark West Virginia, Freedom Kia of Morgantown, Interaction Media, Storymaker, and our studio sponsor, Breezeline, for helping to share these positive stories. If you'd like to become a sponsor of the Positively West Virginia podcast, visit positively.wv.com/sponsor.
Folks, that's a wrap on another episode of Positively West Virginia. As we go through our journey, we just appreciate all the comments, comments and encouragement that you project along the way. It really helps us, and the reviews as well on all the social media platforms. On behalf of our entire Positively West Virginia team, I'm your host, Jim Matuga. Stay positive, West Virginia.